Welcome to the first Off the Record podcast with our senior school principal, Mr. Hoke.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for being
having me.
Yeah. So we're gonna look beyond the books with the faculty, dive a little deeper into their history and where they came from and how they got here.
Mm-hmm. I think a perfect candidate for our first ever interview is Mr. Hoke. Thank you for being with us.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you very much. Honored.
Rain, do you want to start us off?
Okay, I'll start off. When you first joined ISB, why did you join ISB, and why did you join ISB? That's my first question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when you're looking for principal jobs in the international school world, there's a timeline, right? And I had my family and I had decided that we really wanted to actually move back to the U.S., where my wife and I are from originally, and my kids have never lived because we've been international since 2007. And I had searched for some jobs there, and I had been a finalist at a couple international schools, but I wasn't really excited about those, and so didn't pursue those ultimately. And then the opening here was actually a bit late in the sort of scheme of things. We had decided that's it. We're going to move back to Colorado and live near family for a bit and kind of have that experience, which we hadn't done in really since we were 25 or something. It's been a long time. So, but then this popped up, and I know ISB. I am familiar with ISB and some of the faculty from my time in Zurich, where I was for a long time, 9 years. And so threw my hat into the ring, and then meeting some of you and meeting some of the teachers and the parents in the community, I was just really impressed with the focus here, with the mission, with the community. Really, sometimes we say like singing from the same hymn book. People were caring about really similar things. You can see that the values of the community match values of the teachers, the leadership, students, and interesting sort of problems to work on and things to dig into. So, to make a really long story short, it was an interesting role, and I was really excited that it came open in a time when I thought, we're going to move back, and it was also a little unclear what that was going to look like. So, when it worked out, it was an easy yes, and here we are.
Rain, you were on the choosing committee for this job. What?
That's actually a funny story. I was one of the students to actually interview you for the position after Mr. Tico Ohms left. What were you thinking during the interview?
Were you feeling nervous being interviewed by Rain?
Very intimidating character. It's hard. So the student part of these interviews is always really interesting because I could tell that you all were really trying to put on a sort of professional face and demeanor to what you're doing. And students are often, and this is of course what's great about working with adolescents, honest. Very
That's
open
right.
and talking about challenges and things you're thinking about and are on your mind. So it's always kind of an interesting opportunity to ask some questions myself, hear the tenor and tone of the questions, because I think in my career I've been in that situation, I guess 5 or 6 times with groups of students and in different schools, and you really can get a feel for sort of what's going on in the student body. And so,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we should go to Seb, who has some of the more background on how your education and what led you here.
Yeah, so I read somewhere that you studied at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. So Miami University, so Miami from Florida, and then Oxford, Ohio. It's a jumble of a name there.
So Miami was a university before Florida was a state.
Oh.
We're a little touchy.
So it was named after the university.
Yeah.
So Miami, the Miami are a native, indigenous American tribe, right? And they were initially in southwestern Ohio, or what became southwestern Ohio, and were forcibly removed to Florida. Therefore, Miami, Florida, and then were unfortunately forcibly removed to Oklahoma, which is sort of in the central part of the country. But that's where Miami comes from. Actually, the university has a good working relationship with that Native American tribe, and so that's a positive. Actually, had a pejorative nickname for a long time, and it changed when I was I guess my second year or third year in university. So we're one of the first to change those offensive nicknames. So that was a good thing. But yeah, Miami University, Oxford, Ohio.
That's pretty good.
It's a beautiful spot, kids.
Interesting story.
Do your research.
Do your research. Yeah. And you participated in a lot of societies and activities there, and including the fraternity. I don't know really how to say this. Phi Kappa Psi.
Phi Kappa Psi.
Phi Kappa Psi. And some other interesting communities as well. And then just like, you tell us a little bit about your time there and like what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy, maybe like a highlight or something.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, so Miami is a really beautiful campus. It's a Georgian brick campus. It's very open. It's in a fairly small town. My first year was really about making some friends, realizing, hey, I finally get to do what I want to do. And what I really wanted to do was study English literature and politics. This is what I was most interested in, so that's what I studied. I did join the Phi Kappa Psi fraternity. Some of your questions were like, what was that like? At the end of the day, we were big. We were one of the bigger fraternities, 100 plus young men. We were the Phi Psi nice guys. We were Division I. Miami is such a big Greek system that there are divisions in fraternities for sports, and we would win academics, we would win all sports, we would win Greek.
Win at
week.
Everything.
Yeah, I did win a disc golf tournament once.
Powerful.
Yeah, I had to wrestle once. That was awful. I was a high school wrestler, but I was terrible at it. I really just did it to lose weight between football and track.
You play football as well?
I played American football.
All of them.
What
many,
position?
many years. Generally offensive tackle and defensive end. Played a little center. Which is probably what I could have played at
Dabbled in
university,
it.
but I was ready to stop.
You already stopped, yeah.
Getting hit in the head a lot.
And as we all know, college is a pretty crazy time with ups and downs and stuff. So it's pretty interesting to hear about those things. And then, did you work while you were studying there, or?
I did. I worked at a bar called Stadium. It's no longer there. I bounced for a really long time, which is not a particularly glamorous job, checking IDs and taking cover charges and cleaning vomit out of toilets and things like that.
Always a fun job.
Yeah, it's delightful. And ultimately wound up bartending for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then bartending, that brings me to a pretty big topic here.
Yeah.
When reading up on your school years from 94 to 98, you attended the school. When 1998 comes up, there's a pretty big thing that pops up. It's called the beer riots of 1998. Care telling us a little bit about what those were and a little history to that?
Yeah, I'm really proud of your research skills. So, somehow
OPCVL?
Yeah.
OPCVL.
That's right.
Yeah.
You can judge whether or not I'm a trustworthy source on this. So no, as you say, I was a bartender. So 3 nights a week I was always in bars. That night of the beer riots. So it's actually an interesting case study into what makes riots happen or what turns something into a riot. It was daylight, whatever the daylight savings time is. I think it must be in the the fall or the spring when you lose an hour. It was in May. So it was probably May of '98, I would guess. And we sprung forward at midnight, and then the bars closed an hour early. So people had a lot of energy still, I guess, and people went up to, it's called High Street, right? Oxford's, like I said, a small town. It's got a beautiful brick street where a lot of the bars are. My bar was just a little bit down this, like a half a block down. So I walked up, and my brother-in-law was working at a place called Bagel and Deli, and Bagel and Deli also sold, it's awesome. Steamed bagel sandwich is fantastic. If you're ever in Oxford, Ohio, check out Bagel and Deli.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah. Delightful.
Field trip.
And so go there, get a bagel, and then people started buying like cases of beer because they sold beer, and they brought it out in the streets, and people were just kind of hanging outside in the streets, having beer and just sort of having a fun time. Music came on from various places, and it was just kind of a bunch of people. It was probably 500-600 people just in the street, kind of having a good time.
Quite a few people.
Then the police came.
So that set it off. The police arriving.
Yeah. It's a good example of it. Was sort of a bunch of kids doing something you're not allowed to do in America. You're not allowed to drink it outside.
You guys are not 21.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you're 21 and everywhere but New Orleans or Louisiana, they have open container laws. So you're not allowed to just like have a beer on the street in America. You can get ticketed for that.
Oh.
So yeah, the police showed up, sort of said cease and desist, and then people started to like.
They didn't cease and desist?
Break parking meters. I remember that happened. There was like some stupid behavior like that. I believe someone threw a beer or something towards police, and then that was that. They cleared the streets, and then the next night I was working, and I heard something was going on, and a bunch of people had sort of lined these steps. And when you did preload this one as a question. When I had to go back and actually remember what actually did happen. I think I'm conflating. There was a second night where students went and protested because the police did come in and they
excessive force.
Yeah, that was not good. And so students protested, and then the police really came in with like riot shields and like pepper spray. And I walked up there to see what's going on. Probably not a great idea. And I saw a girl that I had been friends with in the past, and she was a newspaper photographer. And so she was there for the Dayton Daily News, and so I gave her a hug, and we immediately both got pepper sprayed. And
you didn't do anything?
You didn't instigate
I hugged my journalist friend on the street and got
big
pepper
mistake,
sprayed.
big mistake.
Yeah, it was very aggressive. So we then took off to go try to see again and clear our eyes and whatnot. But yeah, those were the beer riots. Not great behavior on anyone's part.
What happened with like the school and stuff? Did they kind of like punish kids, or did they say something about it, or did kind of just everything go back to normal right after, like nothing happened?
Well, you had noted that I was an opinion columnist for the Miami Student,
you were
which is the oldest student newspaper in the U.S. Well, I remember writing about it. I can't remember what I wrote. I would have to see if there's any archives, but there was a big to-do. I mean, at the end of the day, if you get in trouble with the law or you get in trouble drinking, the university would have disciplinary procedures, right? So I would imagine students got in some trouble, but
no one you knew personally, or
it's a really good question. Not that I can think of.
No,
not that I can think of.
But do you think universities should be able to like punish students for something they did off campus?
I think it's a great question. I mean, I used to write a lot about that because they would do things like ticket you for being legally parked but without a university sticker on your car, which I don't understand how a police department of a town can provide town-based tickets for a university-based program. Right, you weren't parking on the university campus; you're parking on the town streets. So it's things like that. Oxford was, it's a funny place in that regard. So I mean, probably mostly not, unless it's like a grievous character thing or some sort of like violent act.
Yeah.
Well, do you think something like that could happen in Europe as well, or less likely because of the culture here, or even in Basel? You know.
I think policing here is really different. I mean, I've been to, for example, like the Zurich Street Parade, and there's 1 million people on, like in Bellevue, and it's fine. And, and it's not, there are plenty of people breaking laws, but it's fine. And like,
it happens.
I mean, Fosnacht here, right, is just packed with people, and it's fine.
Nothing you can do about
chaos
it,
for a day, and then afterwards, somehow it all disappears.
Sure. And I think if you sort of flip the switch on like chaos to order, you're gonna have conflict, right?
Yeah.
Like
it's better just to let it happen at that point, and then just clean the mess up after.
Seems like nobody was being hurt in the beer riots
until the police got involved,
and they came in pretty hot, right? And that was, it doesn't excuse breaking public property or throwing things at people,
but it doesn't make it better. The whole situation.
The only reason it happened was that they came. So it's an interesting case study.
Yeah, and then moving on from that a bit. You talked a lot about your fraternity. And while reading up a bit on your fraternity, we saw that in 2015, your fraternity actually got banned for extreme hazing. And then again in 2022, along with Sigma Nu, I believe. Yeah. Was this something, and it talks a lot about the fraternities already having issues with that in the past.
Oh, yeah.
Is this still a part of like fraternity culture in the U.S. or?
I think it must be. I mean, so actually, I joined Phi Psi because they were a non-hazing fraternity. And the group of guys that I joined, I mean, they're a very successful group of people, and I wasn't interested in some of the more like Phi Kappa Psi is not a big national fraternity, and I mean when I was there, for example, Sigma Chi, which is the biggest national fraternity and founded at Miami, had got the death penalty 4 years prior and was still not being allowed to recolonize, right? And
because of hazing?
Because of hazing, absolutely. And I mean, I have heard plenty of stories. But Phi Psi was not a hazing fraternity, and that's why I joined. Just wasn't really interested in that.
But were there like issues with that kind of thing with the fraternities like Sigma Nu or whatever?
Well, absolutely. And then without question, over time, I mean, we're talking about almost a 20-year difference. But over time, obviously, the culture of that group changed, and they got kicked off campus, and then they got kicked off campus again, and then they tried to come back and they said no. And I know that some of my friends are part of the. I mean, it's a beautiful house. I actually took my kids back to Miami, and we went and walked around, and we went by the house, and it's sad because it's a historical monument. It's just falling apart. But they've put a bunch of money into it. They've recolonized now. And some of these friends who were part of that non-hazy, more positive, we were the fraternity that would walk, a girl could be at a bar, we could walk them home. They would come, they would trust it. People knew Phi-Side. A Phi-Side nice guy was a thing. And that was good, right? We talked about quiet confidence. That was like a major part of that group. And so not having to do really stupid things to somehow prove something to somebody was a part of our culture. Yeah. So I'm glad that some of my friends are helping restart that. I think it was a good experience for me. I don't know that I'd recommend it to anybody.
You think kids would look out when they're going to a university or choosing a university, they look at what's the kind of culture, especially in the U.S. with fraternities?
Yeah, and it's university to university, right? Okay, I mean, if you go to, I would imagine, like an NYU or something, it's going to be a much smaller part of the culture, right? My wife went to Pomona, and there's none of it. They're sort of like joke fraternities, right? They're not. It's utterly anathema. So it sort of depends on the university culture, but it could be. I think it could be a positive experience, or not. So be careful as you choose.
Yeah. They said in their reports that they would haze with 100 beers and then no showers, and it seemed pretty rough environments. Yeah. Anyway, I think Noah has some questions as well that we can move on to.
Mm-hmm. At your Pearls of Wisdom talk, you mentioned how you grew up on a farm and how that kind of shifted your perception of what you wanted to be in life. So could you speak to growing up on a farm? Because it's an experience that many of us don't have, really.
That's true. That's very true. I think it's interesting. I'm going to tell you a small story, and then I'll come back to this. When I was teaching English on the Navajo Nation at Tohatchee High School, I would help students write their college essays. I remember having a student who was writing had to write out on a prompt that was like a challenge I overcame. And it was like, I didn't get into National Honor Society the first time, but then the second time I did. And this student I knew lived with her grandparents and helped raise all of her siblings in a hogan that her grandpa had built himself, right? I was like, no one in your audience knows that, right? Like no one in your audience, you're taking for granted that that's kind of people live, like that's a sort of well understood way to live. It's not like you could tell that story, it's hard when you live away to sort of assume
that it's something different, really.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, to this day, I still am surprised by how many people can't, get a car out of like mud or snow, or like how many people can't like change an oil filter.
Something that's normal for you to.
I don't know, hang a painting. This sort of the hands-on stuff. I do like. I mean, I don't have livestock here in Ryonoc, but I do like livestock. My wife's family are cattle ranchers as well in the northern mountains of Colorado, and it's nice to go back and be around cattle. And I don't like horses. No. Sorry, horsey people. But I like, I think it was good for me to be around a lot of animals, be outside a lot. Last time we lived in Switzerland, I had a giant garden. I don't really want to do that as much now, but I can grow anything. There is something to knowing how things work that I feel like more people would benefit from, and I mean, some people just literally don't know that like tomatoes come from a plant, or where they come from, or like avocados grow on trees or whatever, right? There's things that people just don't kind of take for, don't think about. And so knowing that is probably good.
Yeah. Do you think you take some of those things that you learned back on the farm and then apply them here at your teaching to like the school and leading it?
Yeah, yes, I think that experience matters. Yeah. Right? Like that's why an IB education is cool, because we can get a little bit out of the content march and spend some time doing things, right? So if you're in global politics, hopefully you're reading case studies and you're comparing different examples over history and different contexts and cultural contexts or whatever. In science, you're blowing stuff up or whatever. I think experience really matters. And in international education, I mean, I've chosen this for my family as well. It's not everybody has been, to Italy for a weekend, right? To like go and whatever into some village and cruise around and go for a hike and then have lunch somewhere. And you know, not everybody shot over to whatever South Africa or you know, a game park on a holiday. And I think those kind of experiences shape our perception. So I think a lot about that. Like, what are the experiences that everybody's having and what do they mean? And what are we designing those optimally, I think.
Yeah, and I just want to talk a little bit about your experiences. Going back to university, you graduated with an English degree, and then you chose to actually work for the Peace Corps in Kyrgyzstan. Can you just talk a little bit about that experience?
Well, it's a good. It relates to growing up on in a farm in small town, rural America. I'm also British. My mom's from outside of Newcastle. I did grow up going to the UK in summers to see my grandma and my cousins and whatnot. My father's an only child, so I didn't have any family really in the States, except for my grandparents. So I was really ready to go somewhere and do something internationally and travel, but I didn't have any money, right? Like I didn't have any money. I was bartending, right, to pay for like food in college and stuff. So the Peace Corps was always on my mind. I did interview for a number of jobs. I remember I went to it wasn't Ernst & Young, but it was one of the big consulting firms. I was invited to
one of the big four.
Yeah, exactly. It might have been Arthur Andersen, which of course is defunct, or shrunk significantly since 2008, or Enron or whatever. So just kind of being there and thinking, yeah, okay, all right. This is not for me right now. You know, this is not the vibe I'm looking for. And so interviewing with the Peace Corps was really interesting. I was the only person in the history of the program in Kyrgyzstan. I was the seventh group to go who had requested Kyrgyzstan.
You chose to.
Yeah.
I did. I had done a project in my Islam and politics class on Kyrgyzstan as like the island of democracy. And it was the Switzerland of Central Asia, actually, is what they called it, because it's very mountainous, small, and it was looking like it was going to be a very democratic island with a bunch of strong men around it. Worked and didn't work, but I had a really great experience. I taught at a village school, actually in the Uzbek part of the country in the south. Learned Uzbek. Really was, and actually that was formative for me because I was pretty bad at teaching. You know, I mean, there was very little to teach with, but I was just not very good. So I thought, okay, I got to get good at this. And eventually got a master's.
What actually got you to join the Peace Corps? Like, was there someone that was like, oh, Peace Corps fun? Or did you come across it somewhere? Or?
I think somehow it was like in my awareness, you know, and then once I researched it and realized what it was, it just seemed like exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to go somewhere else, to a different country. I wanted to learn a language. I wanted to have a different experience. I wanted to travel. And ultimately, I did a third year, right? I was planning on taking the very small amount of money, but still enough to go backpack through China for a year. And I had a job in Taipei, so I thought I would go there and teach. But September 11th shut the whole program down before I was able to finish, so I had to come back to the States. And there was a question about why did I run ski shops for 3 years? And it was because after 9/11, I thought, maybe I'll do some nonprofit work. No one was hiring, and
It was a tough time.
my friends were out in Colorado skiing, so I went out and did that for a few years, and that was also a great decision.
Yeah.
So did you ski a lot when you were in the ski shop?
Every day, yeah.
Oh.
Naturally, you have to.
Yeah,
course.
yeah. I snowboard. I'm not a skier, but every single day. Keystone for 2 years, Vail for 1. That was fantastic. Yeah.
I was looking a bit into the Peace Corps, and I've come across some criticism. I wanted to get your opinion on it. There was a Harvard Crimson article that said it was an instrument of American colonialism. Do you see any things that people need to be aware of when joining organizations? Like maybe for a gap year you want to join an organization, but you need to kind of understand it or see it in a greater context that maybe you can't if you're just living in Switzerland or the US for your whole life?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, and we would have these conversations from training onward of, are we furthering this sort of agenda, right? And because of course you are. We were there to teach English. And there was business and health as well, right? But I was there to teach English. Ultimately, the model of the Peace Corps is countries request certain kinds of support, right? And that is what then the Peace Corps seeks to send. So, I mean, I was a volunteer for 2.5 years of my life. I think that was a good choice, right? I was teaching English to people who were very interested in learning English, and there's some who weren't, because of course it's school. There's some students who are ready to not, like, it's not my favorite, you know, but looking at the trajectory of some of the students I worked with, I mean, they've had really interesting lives. Some of them are English teachers, some of them are lawyers in Dubai, and it kind of access to something that they weren't going to have otherwise, right? So I think if you're looking into gap year or any kind of service, one of the things we don't do enough is find out if it's something somebody wants us to do. Yeah. So I think that's the best part of the Peace Corps model. They don't go anywhere they're not asked to go.
Did you pick up like the languages there? Like
Yeah. I speak Uzbek, a little bit of Russian. I can sort of get around in Russian still. But Uzbek and some Kyrgyz, yeah.
I think we're gonna end with just any ideas that you have for the school. What are your things that you think should improve at this school specifically? Like any criticisms or room for improvement that you see?
Well, I was just waiting for a podcast to start, so
yeah.
I feel like my work here is done. You know, that's thanks for making it easy.
You're welcome. No problem.
I mean, we're working on a number of things, right? Like we have I think a outstanding group of teachers, and that's amazing. You know, it's a great starting point.
It's helpful,
yeah, and good professionals want to get better, right? So I know what I think is really important for teaching, especially in these kind of environments. Ideally, inquiry-driven, student-centered learning environments like a IB World School. So we're sort of pushing that direction, and I think the student experience is really interesting, right? And like, I would love to hear your ideas. I've heard some. Right now, I'm thinking a lot about, like, I have this sort of feeling that after COVID, you know, some of the pods everyone got put in, you know, like, I feel like what I'm very interested in doing is just like mixing you all up a lot, right? Like having you be able to have experiences with different ages and just because it's fun. And why is awkward such a problem? Awkward is used as like almost like a pejorative.
Yeah.
What's the problem with awkward?
Right.
I just think a lot of students would like to sort of stay in their comfort zone. They've got really no incentive to try something new, and I think that's the awkwardness just puts them off of that. And I don't speak for everyone, but that's
Ryan's not an awkward kind of guy. You got.
I just think that's a sort of general feeling that I get.
Awkwardness keeps us in our comfort zone and makes us reticent to try something new.
Yeah, I think a little bit of, along the lines of that.
We need more awkward. We need to raise the awkward quotient.
That's the platform you're running on.
More awkward, right? Yeah. Because then you're puncturing your comfort zone. Yeah. Trying new stuff and realizing like, oh, like, what do you know? Like, I mean, look, I lived with a family for 3 years. I had an outhouse that, you know, I didn't have any running water in that house. And I learned how fantastic this is the ancient days before smartphones and whatnot. Like, there were no cell phones. I mean, there was nothing.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
You know how great it is to sit for like a week in the summer and have literally nothing to do but just have fruit from like the orchard you're sitting in and like a little ditch trickling water by.
Nothing is better than a ditch.
Yeah. Nothing is fantastic. Nothing is great, right?
You think it goes both ways? Like teachers also need to get out of their comfort zone sometimes?
Absolutely. Doesn't everybody? I mean, like what is a good definition of growth that doesn't involve getting out of your comfort zone?
Have you thought of like something like maybe like a retreat with some of the teachers and then taking them out of their comfort zone, like you say?
Throwing them off planes.
Let's not throw people off
planes.
No,
parachutes, of course.
Absolutely. So I'm a whitewater kayak instructor, right? Maybe we should go out, dunk everybody in cold water.
Build some trust.
Yeah. No.
Team building experience.
It's a great question. It's a great question. 100%.
Yeah.
Why not do that?
Yeah, and then on that note, I think that's a pretty good place to end. Thank you so much to Mr. Hoke for
being the first guest, getting out of your comfort zone.
Inaugural podcast.
Yeah.
That's right. It's been super awkward, but I'm just kidding. It has made me feel comfortable. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for the research. That's hilarious. I will always remember when I was asked about the beer riots, something I hadn't thought about since the Bill Clinton administration. So thanks very much. I appreciate you having me. It's a great idea. I hope you do many more of these.
All right, thank you so much. And we definitely hope
try.
to.
Yeah, we'll try and
we'll get through them all.
Yeah, hopefully get through them all.
Everyone.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much, and see you soon.
Yeah, thank you.